Statistics show us that stress causes a lot of things to happen in our life today. And right now, during this COVID-19 pandemic, the reality is that stress is happening in greater ways. And so that stress is attacking the home. Check out today's A2 Life podcast with a special guest, Chantel Oney, as we talk about how to fight stress and build and disciple at home, loving our husbands, loving our wives, loving our kids, so that we can glorify the Lord together. Hey everyone, and welcome to the A2 Life podcast. We're so thankful that you are either viewing this or listening to this on your podcast platforms, and thankful for this time where we have a conversation about discipleship in our personal lives and the life of our church here at Ridgecrest. And we're excited for a special guest today, and so I'm turning it over to the man himself, James Oney, because he needs to introduce our guest today.
Yeah, well, we have the most precious, the vivacious, or the I can't say what I want to say on but my baby, Chantel, my wife, my one and true and only, Oney.
Hey, I like what you did there, James. My one and true only Oney. Okay. All right. So welcome, Chantel.
That's the Black Stallion. Thank y'all for having me.
Well, I say we've had a lot of guests on the podcast, James, but today might be the most special day for us to have the one and only Oney, Miss Chantel, on here with us. And so we wanted to do this today, though, James, because of some things that you have read and some statistics out there that just talks about, in the midst of where we are right now in a quarantine situation due to COVID-19, the stress that brings the stress just that is coming to life right now that really impacts the family, and that's the husband and wife covenant relationship, that's down even to the kids, and so how to handle those kind of things. And so we really wanted to have that conversation today. And so James, just share your heart just really quick about some of the stuff you've read, and then we'll jump into our questions.
Yeah, one of the things that just startled me, to be honest with you, was the fact that when you have, when we came into this pandemic, divorce rates and troubles in the homes rose. And so initially you're looking at it and you're like, okay, man, that's crazy. But when you're looking at it, they're spending a lot of time together now. And now it's like, okay, what do I say? What do I do? I spend a lot of time at work or with the kids, but with my spouse, I have not been cultivating the relationship. And so that was something that I wanted to tackle, because I think it all encompasses discipleship. And as men of the household, I think, as spiritual leaders of the household, I think we should make sure that is healthy first, instead of our respective other areas like work and whatnot. Our home front need to be spiritually set in that sense. And so, and I wanted to do this podcast because, I don't know who's all out there, going through this or maybe experiencing some disconnect with their spouse. And but I wanted to be able to bring something to help in that way, and to disciple in a sense in that way.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, James, when we think of this, and Chantel, I was looking and reading some articles that just preparing for this conversation, and the LA Times just a few days ago posted something that's called "How to Avoid Becoming a Coronavirus Divorce Statistic," and it talks about how in China the divorce rates have skyrocketed during their time of the pandemic, and just a lot of interesting things to read. And a lot of it comes to, again, the stress that's at the house right now, because we're home together, whether maybe for the first time you got husband and wives at the house at the same time all day, and they normally not around each other that long, and you got kids everywhere, and we're trying to homeschool, and we're trying to do all of these kind of things. And so I think this is an important conversation, an excited one to have today. And so let's just start here. When you think of just this where we are right now, James, we talk about discipleship all the time. And, everything we've said in the last couple of weeks is about reaching, building, and connecting. And we've said, start where you are. And that first place of circle of influence is in your home. And so let's just talk for just a minute as we lead up to this, as far as how do you disciple at home right now? Let's think about that, just about with your kids. Let's kind of start there, and then we'll move into the spouse relationship.
Yeah, one of the things, first, we have two sets of kids, if you want to put it that way. And so it's interesting trying to do that. My older two, they are at an age where I want them to own their relationship. And so for them to, we're making sure, hey, are you doing your devotional time? But just even taking those opportunities when they ask or what they may be doing, or, sometimes it frustrates us, whatever they're doing. And we're like, man, and we have an opportunity. Well, me, I can apologize. I ain't mean to yell at you, or I shouldn't have done that. And that's showing, that's definitely them even in that, because it's just showing, look, daddy don't always get it right, and we need to work through this. And so I try to take those opportune times to be able to voice, certain things that are going on even with their lives. Sometimes my boys, they just have questions and they just ask, and I have that opportunity to share with them. And I know my wife probably will talk about this, but I know one thing my wife is doing. My boys walk with her every morning early. I'm in the bed, and they're walking, and so, it's interesting. But for the younger two, I just try to model and, and also talk about, Jesus and prayer and stuff of that nature. Joel is more so, he's 2 getting ready to be 3, and so he's going to begin to experience more stuff in that sense. My wife, we were talking, it may have been a month ago, but we were talking about when Caleb and Israel, when they was Joel's age, I taught them the Psalm 23. And so we would both, Chantel and I, we would sit down, we would go with them, and they, would do that. And so I'm looking forward to teaching it to Joel. And when Timothy comes along, being able to do that too, as well. But just trying to find those opportunities there, and to cultivate those relationships there. But what about you, babe?
Well, I think just for me, I've been at home with the boys now since March 17th, pretty much, when their schools were dismissed for the remainder of the school year. And so for me, I had to just kind of ask myself, what am I going to do now to be intentional with the relationship with the boys? Because here we are, we're spending every single day together now. So one of the first things that, I really began to do with the boys was, I said, you know what, guys, you guys are still going to read, even though you aren't in school. And they was like, oh. And so I was like, yeah, you're going to read. And they said, well, what am I going to read? I said, don't you have some books in your room? And they was like, yeah. But I said, you know what? No, I have the book that we're going to read. And probably about when this book first came out in 2016, it's The Prince Warriors by Priscilla Shirer. Came out, I think, in 2016. I bought the book the first week that it was released, but honestly, we never read it together. So this time I said, you know what we're going to do? We're actually going to read this book together. And so what I did was I outlined, there's 26 chapters in the book. So I outlined those chapters, and this is what you're going to read this day. And then I'll read it. And then we actually would come together the following day, and we would discuss the chapters that we've read in there. And basically the book is on like Ephesians 6. It's an Ephesians 6 books for little kids, about that, teenager kind of age and everything. And we talk about, spiritual warfare, the shoes of peace. We talk about the breastplate of righteousness and what it's like for us to wear those items, those garments, though not physically, and everything. So here our children are now, they're getting an opportunity to really be able to see, especially amidst the pandemic that's going on, about spiritual warfare and how we as believers, even them being 11 and 12, how they're supposed to respond even in times like this. And I know James mentioned that, the boys, they walk with me. So I walk every morning. Typically I'm out the house at 6 o'clock, and they rotate mornings with me and they walk with me. And so during that time, we find ourselves, we're praying as our neighbors are leaving and going to work. We see a neighbor and we'll stop and we'll pray for that particular neighbor and that God keeps them safe as they're at work and throughout their day. We talk about creation. I mean, I think the morning time is just so beautiful when we can look out on all that God has created and everything. So we talk about creation. But one thing that I also notice is that typically my conversations are different between Caleb and Israel. Israel's 11, so my conversations tend to be a little bit elementary kind of to say, because he's typically funny and he's talking about all kinds of stuff, and the conversation, it shifts real quickly with him. But with Caleb, the conversations are definitely more intentional on those times when we're walking, and I consider that such great mommy and son time, such great discipleship during that times, because we a couple of weeks ago we were walking and he was saying some stuff and it just ticked me off. And so we kind of had a little spat, even in the midst of walking. And so after we took about 5 minutes and we cooled off, I said, kid, get up here with me. And we began to talk and just kind of reconcile the relationship and our conversation with one another. And we actually ended that conversation talking about just the nature of leadership, because he said, I don't get all this stuff that we're in. I want to play with my friends. I want to do this and I want to go here. I want to do that. I want to do my camps this summer and all this stuff. And we got to talking about the nature of leadership and how one day he's going to have a family. And he's going to have to be able to lead his family with integrity, with wisdom, with God-fearing love and compassion, and everything. So we got on that conversation with him. And then just like last week, Caleb and I, we were walking, we were on the last leg of our walk, and we walked by a house we usually walk past, and there are dogs at this house, a bulldog, a German Shepherd, and some other kind of dog. And they're always in the fence. And so we walk past and we turn around at this house and head back home. But this day, I don't know how, but these dogs got out of the fence and they were on to us. Caleb is like a 747. He is a jet at this time. And so only thing I could do was that he said, oh, Mom, the dogs are coming. And I'm like, the dogs? And I'm looking back and I'm like, oh my goodness, these 3 dogs that are coming. What am I going to do in this moment, this instance? So I grabbed his arm and I said, don't you run, because he was gone. And so meanwhile, I'm still kind of assessing, like, where are we? What can we do if these dogs keep coming and everything? So I am less than 3 feet away from the bulldog. I could tell he was the alpha male in this thing. And only thing I knew at that point was I threw up my hands and I began to quote Psalms 23 out loud. And I just began to quote that, and we kept walking, quoting and walking. The dogs did not come any further to us. But I looked at that as an opportunity to be able to tell him about the importance of hiding God's word in your heart. And when you need God's word at the right time, it'll come out of you. And so we got home and we was kind of sharing everything what happened with James and everything. And James just kind of hypothetically asked the question. And he was like, do you think the Lord stopped those dogs? And I'm like, absolutely. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, God shut the mouths of lions, then I know he stopped these dogs, Yeah. So it's just, I think for parents, it's about taking every moment, opportunity that you have and really seizing that to be able to point your children in the direction of the Lord. Because guess what? We're not going to be with them all the time. Caleb is going to 8th grade. Sooner or later, he's going to be driving and we won't be with him all the time. But if we point them to the Lord right now, the hope and the prayer is that at the right time, they'll be able to make those godly decisions that not only bring smiles to our faces, but they honor our Father in heaven. So I just think about seizing opportunities to be able to disciple your children, learning Bible verses, make sure they're doing their devotional time and stuff like that, I think are just really important.
Yeah, that's tremendous. I think of 2 words that's just common in what y'all just said, and that's intentional opportunities. I mean, I think you both just said that over and over again in what you were saying. And Chantel, you made the note of understanding too that each kid's different. So the intentional opportunities that we have with each kid is even different per kid and situation and circumstances. And so I think it's important for us to start with that question, though, because the reality with kids at home right now, they need us as parents to kind of guide their day. And I know that's one thing Lee has done in a tremendous way. Like, they've kind of set a schedule out, and they're working through their schedule for schoolwork and playtime and rest time. You know, they're just kind of all that kind of built into her day. And so they need us to do that. And so it's almost like for us as spouses right now, like, it's such a big role that we're playing for mom, dad, teacher, coach, you know, whatever, everything's all meshed together. Kind of start there, so then we can understand, okay, now what about us? Because in a lot of ways, we kind of have to default to go right to our kids, and we do that a lot of times anyway, and probably shouldn't. But now what about the spouse? How do we make time for each other? How do we invest in each other during these days of quarantine, where we're pulled in a lot of different ways, maybe more so because of the mom and dad situations we find ourselves in? But how do we now think about investing in each other and during these days?
Absolutely. I agree, man.
I think, I know you mentioned about Lee, but I think one thing too that, I try to be intentional with, setting up a routine. One thing that I found is important. My day really hasn't, or I should say, there hasn't been much rest or Sabbath time for me, because I still get up between 4:45 and 5 o'clock every morning, because I recognize that I have to take my time and spend some time with the Lord before the house gets moving. Because if I don't cultivate my relationship with the Lord, guess what? Everybody about to feel it. Because it's like the saying is, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So, if I don't do what I have to do for myself, it's so important that I take time, that I do my quiet time, my devotion. I'm a journal girl, so I like to write down in my journal and everything. I always have a particular passage that I'm studying right now. I'm walking through Isaiah 55. And I find out that when that, I can then give if I would like to say this, I can be the best mom and the best wife that I can be to James and the boys and everything. The boys are with me 24/7. So, I'm fortunate that my background is in education. So it was really kind of easy for me to go into, teacher mode and everything. So I think that transition has been relatively easy for me and everything. But I think it's so important that we be intentional with making sure that we're spending time with the Lord and everything. And I think that's shown, the impact of that is reflected throughout the rest of our day and everything. I find that my tone is typically a lot easier throughout the day and everything when I've taken time with the Lord. And it definitely helps, I think, our relationship with one another. I don't think James and I don't think we have too many arguments or spats and stuff. I don't think we have too many. If they are, they're not really really big. I don't remember the last time we had a big argument or anything like that. Typically we pretty cool and we pretty chill. Yeah. I think so for the most part and everything. But I think one thing for James and I is that has really been helpful during this time is that we did away with this a long time ago, years ago, but we don't have a television in our bedroom. And I think that's important because then it gives you an opportunity to focus on yourself as a couple, because you said it, you alluded to this just a moment ago, that typically we always find ourselves talking about the kids. You think about if you've ever been on a date with your spouse and everything, you're sitting down having dinner. What are you talking about? The kids, what the kids are doing, this is that, and the other, and we rarely find time to talk about ourselves and talk about us as a couple and everything. So I think that has been really good about us not, and it's been helpful during this time, not having a television in the room, because we don't have that to occupy our attention and everything. So I think that's been really good for us.
Yeah, I heard something the other day that was it was really kind of a neat idea. This guy was saying on this podcast I was listening to that him and his wife, like they call it their like family business meeting, and like they do it every Sunday night, and that's where him and his wife like sit down and like talk through like the logistics of the week, calendars, schedule, like who's doing what, what's going on, like because he said what they were saying is anytime that they were spending intentional time with each other, that would come to the forefront of their conversation. Like before they could like on a date night or even just like, right now, like for, we're not really going anywhere maybe, but so like when the kids go to bed and you got like, just a second before you're going to sleep, you're just like trying to talk as husband and wife, you're so consumed with like what's happening next as far as the business side of the family. Just like calendar, he said, like we do that on Sunday nights. And then that way we know when we have intentional time during the week, we're not going to talk about those things. We've already discussed them, and we're going to really kind of get to just kind of check on each other and listen to each other well. So I thought it was a really good thought on idea of, as we said earlier about with our kids, being intentional.
That's really cool.
And so what do y'all think, you mentioned, y'all mentioned for y'all, there's not, there's not like these huge spats or anything like that, but in the reality, maybe somebody listening or watching this, there might have been some of that right now because you're so close to each other, like so much going on. I mean, your both spouses are working from home. I know I have friends that are doing that. Their both spouses are at home with each other. Kids are around. Like, so what would y'all speak to if like maybe this quarantine has been a pretty negative thing towards someone's marriage and maybe they kind of hit a place where there's some difficulty? Like, what would y'all share to somebody that might find themselves in that situation?
First, and this may sound like it's a cliche, but first, I would ask about the devotional life, because if we're not spending time with the Lord, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hectic. And now I'm not saying that when we do spend time that stuff won't come. It will. However, I think we're more apt to handle it if we're in our word and we're studying it, our word. So the first thing I would say, devotional time, make sure that you are having a consistent devotional time with the Lord. Beyond that, as we're looking at each other, as husband and wife, we got to realize too, and Chantel and I, we took a course, it was a class, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it talked about our emotional tanks. And I think that can be empty, or half full or whatever it may be. And that needs to be filled. And obviously the only thing that can fill that is Christ and his word. And I think that the more that we get into God's word, the more cohesive we will be together. We typically, as people, as humanity, we typically, throw the word out a lot of times and just try to look for other means to help us in marriage and so forth. But I think the word is at the center of everything that we should be doing. And so as we are spending time in God's word, I think that it'll help things better. We can find joy in most difficult times. And it helps with our kids, as we're even navigating as well. And so just spending that time in God's word, I think that's vital, and I think that is key to that. So if anybody is going through something, first check that, now, and I'm not saying, you just pick up a devotional book and you read the devotional book. I'm talking about getting in God's word, opening the word and reading it and praying to God and asking him questions, so forth. So I definitely would go to God's word first.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's important, in addition, to going to God's word, because I think that should be our basis, our primary thing that we should do. But also I think it's about, I believe in looking for the practicality on how I can serve my spouse every single day and everything. So that means that the husband is looking for a way, how can I serve and help my wife in this particular area? If she's the one that's helping with the kids and doing homework with them, then maybe I can get in here and prepare lunch for them. So looking about practical ways to be able to help, the same thing for the wife. If the husband is doing something, what can I do to be able to serve? Because I think a lot of times, especially right now with this pandemic, because, and I mean, you talked about, the article earlier that, divorce rates have increased. And I can only imagine that when, various jurisdictions and courts and counties and municipalities begin to open up, we may see some increase in like divorce filings and everything. I think a lot of time, because we end up having, I think if we look at divorce, often a lot of times the root cause of it is pride, is egoism. And we may even see a lot of this being played out and going on in the home, because guess what? Typically we spend more time at work than we actually do at home. And so when we are now forced to spend time be at home and spend time with our spouse and with our children, guess what? We don't know how to react to that because we've been doing things for so long for ourselves. So I think it's about shifting our mindset, so to say, and not just thinking about myself anymore. Okay, I got to think about these 4 kids and this man I have at home. I got to think, how can I serve him? How can I be able to serve them in the best way that honors the Lord? So I think it's to removing I from the equation, and begin to think about, we are a family unit and how can we help each other? That's one thing we say to our children. One thing our children hate to do is clean the kitchen. Okay, they absolutely hate the kitchen.
Me too.
But I often say when I'm in the kitchen that we are a family, we are a team, and we help each other. The sooner we help each other and we get in there together in the trenches with one another, the sooner we can get that kitchen clean and we can all sit down and we can relax and everything. So it's, I think, removing I from the equation, thinking about the other individual, thinking about those children and how you can serve. And guess what? If James is thinking about me, and if I'm thinking about James, neither one of us is going to go lacking because we got each other's back. And I think it's so important that we make sure we think about the other person and not ourselves. And then guess what? I think we can begin to have some happiness and some unity, some joy inside of our home that, we can actually look forward to being at home with our families, and it's not foreign to us.
Another thing I do want to make mention of, and I just thought about this, is that some of them some people may be like I am, or where I'm at work and she's home with the boys. And this could even attribute to the divorce rate as well. When the person comes home, they don't do anything. Yeah. And it's like, hold up. It's like, hold up, I've been here, all day with these boys, and you're just going to sit down and do nothing, and this could work both ways. It could be the husband that's at home and the wife that's working is coming home and just sitting down and doing it, But I know one of the things I try to do that's intentional is when I get home and I know I'm going to get home, I know she's been here with these kids, these 4 boys that are, they're cray-cray. And so I just take them upstairs, like, let's play, and give her that time, to just be relieved from the boys, for a good bit.
And James does really great about that. The 2 little ones, he always gives them a bath. It's very rarely do I have to give somebody a bath and everything. And that I'm appreciative for, because I have fixed lunch. I have cleaned up. I'm usually in the midst of prepping dinner when he comes home and everything. I have taken the kids outside. I did homework with the older 2. I did work from home myself. So I enjoy him taking them kids upstairs, playing with them and giving them a bath, because I need my mental sanity. I need that and everything. Just to be able to give me that extra push and that energy that I need to be able to get through the rest of the evening, I think is really important.
Yeah, that definitely happens at our house in a lot of ways as well. And Lee, sometimes she was just like, I'm just going for a ride or getting in the car. I'm like, where are you going to go? She's like, I don't know, but I'm just going somewhere. And she goes and sits in the Publix parking lot.
Feel me, because I told James, I feel her because I told James that sometimes I just go sit in the bathroom. I'm not doing nothing but sitting.
As you think about this, I think another thing just to add to all of this, and I got one more thing and we'll wrap up, but being honest with each other as well, because there are probably a lot of feelings going through your heads, right? I mean, just in our heads right now, because we're together and just things are different and our schedules are whack. And so just taking a moment as a husband and spouse and just saying, hey, can we think about this? Or just trying to do it in a calm manner, like when you're not in the heat of the moment or something like that. Just calm down if there's something that's caused some situation. But just share, hey, this is what's going on in my life right now. This is what I'm thinking. Hey, can we do this differently? Like when Lee and I just stop for a second and, we can tell that, maybe something happened that we weren't excited about or some things didn't go the way we wanted it to go. Like when we stop and just talk to each other and talk in a rational way and are honest, well, hey, the way you came home and you did this didn't make me very happy, or the way this happened or that happened, just being honest and doing it in a calm way has helped us tremendously in what's going on around us. So let's do this. Let's wrap up with this, James, and I want you to, let's do this. Let's let Chantel go first, and then James wrap us up and just wrap us up with any final thoughts for today's podcast. But Chantel and James, here's what I want you to do both individually is I want you to speak to the mom, Chantel, that's listening right now. Anything that you just like to say on the end of a mom to a mom. And James, you do the same thing for a dad right now. And so Chantel, you go first. James, finish that, and then just wrap us up, James, with any final thoughts.
Well, I think to the mothers that are out there, you're home with those babies every single day, and you may be, you're probably going through a lot of emotions anyway. There may be some anxiety, some fear, or whatever the case may be. You may be worried about some things financially or whatever it may be. I think to the moms out there, recognize this, that the Lord knew that we were going to be in this COVID-19 situation way before when he formed the foundations of the world. Okay. So if our Father, who is all knowing, knew that we were going to be in this situation, trust and rest assured that if you're walking with him, that he has you, that he knows everything that you need. And I think it's so important to recognize, he tells us that his thoughts are not our thoughts and his ways are not our ways. They're so much higher, so much grander than how we think and how we go about doing life. And honestly, it's quite encouraging to know that God's ways are so much higher than ours. You think about us thinking like this small when his ways are so much grander and so much loftier than what we actually think. It's great to know that we serve a God that's looking out for our best interests. And I always kind of look at things like this. Moms, we could be in so many other situations in life, but guess what? We get to do this right now, this pandemic, this COVID-19 with our greatest blessings, and that's with our spouse and with our children. So you know what? It's okay if things aren't going the way you expected them to go. If your summer is not shaping up how you want it to shape up, that's okay, because there is something greater in this, because God has it under control, under his authority and everything. So I think it's about moms just relaxing and just kind of enjoying the moment. And that's difficult for me to say because I'm very type A. And so to tell me relax, it's kind of, but I am learning even in this, you know what, it's okay. If it's on paper, it can be changed. If nobody has not lost a limb and we are not in the emergency room, then guess what? Things are okay. Things could be so much worse, but just taking the opportunity just to relax, find those ways to just be intentional in your home, with yourself, with your family. I think it's just so important, and just recognize that, you know what? God's got this. We just have to be able to trust him in this. I'm a firm believer that he has already gone before us, preparing the way, and that God is walking right smack behind us, protecting the way. So just trust God in this, moms, and just recognize that he has everything under control.
I would say ditto and echo. you know, um, for the fathers, we may have some that have lost their jobs, and they're depressed. They're like, man, what am I going to do? How am I going to provide for my family? Like you said, God is in control. One of the things that stood out to me during this time is I have a pristine opportunity to be with my family and to disciple my family. You know, as fathers, we hold a higher, a responsibility, a higher responsibility, in that we are the spiritual heads, the coverings over our families, and that's a weighty responsibility. But it's a great opportunity right now to be able to pour into our family, and to lead our family. And I would say this too: husbands, don't be lazy. Don't be lazy. Seize this moment, seize this time that we have, that God is allowing us to have, and to be intentional with our spouse, with our kids, if we haven't before. And so I would definitely, just basically say that, and ditto what Chantel said. God is in control. He knows everything.
Yeah.
So
He is in control.
Yeah.
And if I could just add just this one thing, even as James,
Right.
even as James was talking, just, we never know when we'll get this time back again. We never know why this is upon us, why this has happened. But let's forget about all the whys, and let's just say, what am I going to do with the opportunities that I've now been handed? And everything is kind of like the adage, when you have lemons, you make lemonade, So what am I going to do with this time that is going to be God honoring? I'm going to have an opportunity to spend time with my children, and everything. I know for us, we did a puzzle together as a family, and I'm in the process of redoing one of our walls in our living room, and we're actually going to frame this puzzle. So this is like our COVID-19 tribute. So every time we look at this puzzle, we will have an opportunity to say, we did that together as a family during the coronavirus. And we have grandchildren one day. They said, Grandma, Granny, where is this puzzle? Why do you guys have this puzzle here? Well, you know what? We did that with your parents, with your dad, when we were in the house for the coronavirus, So those opportunities are really sweet, really rewarding. And just parents just take those moments and those opportunities. And moms and dads, if you have an opportunity, still away with each other just for a few moments, especially if you got older ones and you maybe can leave those older ones at home for like 30 minutes. Moms and dads, y'all go for a walk together just to be able to talk and communicate with one another and everything. If you want to put the little ones down for a nap or for bedtime, stay up a little bit longer and just talk to one another. It don't have to be about much, but the opportunity that you're communicating and you're willing to cultivate your marriage and your relationship, even when times seem to be at its most difficult point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that's worth ending on right there. And so, Chantel, thank you for hanging out with us today. You are maybe more fun than James. I don't know if I
like to think that I'm the fun one.
Well, we're going to do this again. We are doing this again, no doubt, because I think we could have kept talking all afternoon. But anyways, thank you guys so much for checking out today's A2 Life podcast. And we always ask these questions as we wrap up. Who are you reaching? How are you being built up to then build up others? And then thinking about how are you connecting to the mission and purpose of God. And so we want to encourage you to fulfill that mission that God has for you. And so James, Chantel, thank you again for today. And again, thank you for listening and checking out today's podcast.